Hello, my name is Gabriel Maciel. I'm a VMware Senior Systems Engineer. I'm here today to talk about the VMware NSX architecture and component interaction. Since we only have a few minutes, I'm going to start right away. But we are going to start with the physical network requirements. So in the physical layer, we assume that we have a stable physical layer. And the main requirement there will be to create one VLAN that is going to be used for transporting the VXLAN protocol. This VLAN will have a special requirement of 1600 bytes MTU. So from the physical network perspective, we assume a stable underlying physical infrastructure, one VLAN that we are going to use for VXLAN transport, and that specific VLAN will have a requirement of an MTU of 1600 bytes. Then we move into the data plane. In the data plane, the first component that we are going to need is ESXi version 5.5 and up. Then we're going to need a virtual distributed switch. This is also a requirement. And when we do the host and cluster preparation, what we are going to do is we are going to install specific kernel modules and user world agents. These kernel modules are going to enable the three distributed services that VMware NSX is going to provide. Those three distributed services are distributed logical routing, distributed logical switching, and distributed firewall. Also, we are going to enable two user world agents. One of the user world agents will be the NetCPA, which is the control plane agent, and the second one will be the vSphere stateful firewall daemon. We support distributed services, and we also support centralized services. In the centralized services, we will have the Edge Services Gateway. These centralized services are specifically services like load balancer, router, firewall, VPN, and these centralized services are going to be provided through the Edge Services Gateway. As you can see in the slide, the Edge Services Gateway has its own control plane and data plane, and it's also a VM form factor. So if we review the data plane, which is where the forwarding happens, we will have the ESXi version 5.5 and up. We have the virtual distributed switch. We're going to do the host preparation. We're going to install the modules that are going to enable the distributed services for NSX, which is the logical switching, logical router, and distributed firewall. And we are going to enable the two user world agents, the NetCPA and the vSphere stateful firewall daemon, that is going to communicate with the NSX manager and with the control plane. On the other hand as well, we said that we supported distributed services and centralized services. The centralized services, we said, are provided by the Edge Services Gateway, which has its own control plane and data plane. Now that we reviewed the physical underlying network requirements and the requirements that we need from the data plane, we are going to move into the control plane. In the control plane, we have the controller cluster. The controller cluster is responsible for two of the three distributed services that we mentioned before. Those two distributed services that the controller cluster is responsible for is the VXLAN or logical switching and the distributed logical routing updates that are going to be sent to the data plane, where the forwarding is going to happen. There is also one additional component when we are using specifically the distributed logical router, which is the distributed logical router control VM. The distributed logical router control VM is going to do the routing peering and is going to communicate the new routes that are LAN to the controller cluster. The controller cluster is going to update the data plane, and in the data plane, we will have the forwarding. So as you can see, we have the physical infrastructure, we have the data plane, we have the control plane, and then we have the management plane. In the management plane, we have the NSX manager, and we have vCenter Server. The NSX Manager is the only component that we are going to install, and from there, we are going to provision the rest of the components that are needed for the control plane and the data plane itself. The ratio between NSX Manager and vCenter Server is a 1-to-1 ratio. So one NSX Manager is going to be registered with the vCenter Server, and even in NSX 6.2, although we can create universal objects across the NSX Manager and different vCenter servers, we still have this registration ratio of 1-to-1, but then we will be able to create universal objects across up to 8 vCenter servers that are going to be sharing that configuration for the universal object. There is one more layer that I want to mention, and this is an optional layer, which is the consumption layer where you usually will have your cloud management platform. This cloud management platform can be vRealize automation, can be VMware integrated OpenStack, or can be your own custom platform. Now, let's review the deployment steps that we're going to have to do in order to have a fully functional VMware NSX installation. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to register NSX Manager with vCenter Server. Once NSX Manager is registered with vCenter Server is going to enable a plugin that is going to allow you to start creating and configuring the different objects that you're going to be provisioning, and at the same time, we are going to deploy as well the controller clusters. So we register NSX Manager with the vCenter Server, and then through this plugin that's going to be enabled in the vCenter Server, what we do is we deploy the controller cluster, which is comprised of 3 controllers, which is the minimum and the maximum size as well. Once that is done, we proceed to prepare the clusters where we want NSX Manager to be installing the kernel modules that we are going to use for the distributed services. And after that, we continue deploying the different components, for example, the Edge Services Gateway. This way, we have a full picture of the interaction between the physical plane, the data plane, the control plane, and the management plane. Now, if we review a little bit more in detail the management plane, you're going to see that the management plane is a virtual machine. It's the only virtual machine that we need to install initially in the environment. And then we will provision from there the centralized components, and at the same time, we are going to provision the controller cluster VMs. We are going to prepare the ESXi host, and the NSX Manager provides the entry point for third-party vendors to register their services as well, right? So the management plane also provides the northbound API that we can use to start automating some of the operations. So the consumption can be done through the vSphere web client plugin that is going to be installed once we register the NSX Manager, or directly pointing to the NSX Manager API. At the same time, the third-party vendors are going to register their own services pointing to the NSX Manager, and that way the NSX Manager is going to be aware of those services and is going to augment its capability as well. Then if we move into the control plane, we said that the control plane is comprised of 3 VMs, which are 3 controllers, which is the minimum and maximum number of controllers that we have. These 3 VMs obviously are in charge of 2 of the 3 distributed services. We said logical switching and logical routing. And the benefits of it is that, among other things, it's going to provide, for example, R suppression, and it's going to allow you to have VXLAN with a replication mode which doesn't depend on multicast. So the reason why we have 3 controllers is also because we want to offer additional resiliency besides the vSphere resiliency and the control plane. Then, if we review all the components and how they will interact, we will see that we have one-time tasks, which are creating this controller cluster after we deploy and register the NSX manager with vCenter server, then doing the host preparation and preparing the data plane for the forwarding that we are going to do in there. And after that, we have recurring tasks. The recurring tasks are more related to creating logical switches, creating logical routers, creating distributed firewall rules, deploying our edge services gateway, and providing additional services. Just to finish, remember that we have 2 types of services. We support distributed services and we support centralized services. And at the same time, we support through the NSX Manager Northbound API, consumption via the vSphere web client or consumption via the API, and also integration with cloud management platform if you have one already. Thank you very much, and I'm including one more slide for you to access the hands-on labs if you wish to do so, where you can learn more about NSX and how to deploy it and reference our design guides as well. Thank you very much.